Good morning or afternoon or whenever you're watching this U.S. history class. Um, as many of you probably know by now, I am in quarantine for the next 2 weeks. So we will be doing notes much the same way we have been up to this point. We'll just be doing them via video. I'll be going through them a little bit quicker than I have been in class for the simple fact is you can stop, rewind, pause, and take as long or as little amount of time as you need to complete writing these down. Um, the other thing is, if you got any questions about anything that is posted on Schoology, whether it's notes, whether it's homework, whatever the case might be, sorry about that. That was my phone going off. You all have my email address, so please don't hesitate to give me a holler, and I'll be happy to get back to you with whatever assistance I can provide. So, we'll start on our next thing, the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, so the Emancipation Proclamation was announced in September of 1862, but it didn't take effect until January of 1863. Now, the Civil War had been going on for almost 3 years at that point in time. But even with that still being the case, Lincoln gave this proclamation and it freed slavery in all of the spots that had seceded in the Union. Okay, so like South Carolina, Virginia, all those places, all those states that had seceded, it freed the slavers. Now, the states that the Union had already taken back, so like Kentucky, Maryland, those have all those border states that we talked about earlier. All those states were exempt from the Emancipation Proclamation. So if you had states in those, or you had slaves in those states, you could keep your slaves. The other thing, if you came back into the Union before this took effect in January of 1863, you could keep your slave. You could keep your slaves. So it was one of those deals where it was Lincoln's last-ditch effort to get the Union to come back together by throwing the South an olive branch and say, hey, you come back, you can keep your slaves. We'll try and work out the details after the fact. But the Confederate States, again, they've been fighting for almost 3 years, or it was starting the third year of the Civil War, refused to come back in, and the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect on January 1st of 1863.
The war drags on. Lincoln is determined to end it and abolish slavery. In September 1862, he gives the South an ultimatum. Rejoin the Union. He threatens to forcibly liberate their slaves if they refuse. But the South, having tasted independence, does not want to rejoin a union where slavery would be at risk. They reject the ultimatum. Lincoln is in no mood to negotiate. If the South won't free their slaves, he will do it himself.
For white Southerners, it was a confirmation that their thoughts about Lincoln all along, that he was, in fact, somebody who was bent on destroying what they thought was the Southern way of life. In the North, in a sense, it gave people a different understanding of what the war was about.
On January 1st, 1863, Lincoln issues a proclamation abolishing slavery in the rebellious southern states. Thanks to the telegraph, the news quickly spreads.
On the 4th day of January, in the year of our Lord, 1860. Lincoln had totally grown to where he said that not only should blacks not be slaves, they should be treated as equal citizens with full enfranchisement, right to vote, right to participate.
All persons held as slaves shall be then, henceforth, and forever free.
So, what did the Emancipation Proclamation actually mean? The one thing it did was, up until the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, there was still a lack of clarity exactly what was going on, what they were fighting for. Some people were fighting against slavery, some people were fighting against the rebellion and the secession of the southern states. But this kind of clarified exactly what the Civil War was truly about. The other thing that it did was Great Britain, we talked about Great Britain yesterday, but Great Britain was strongly against slavery. And the proclamation with Lincoln freeing the slaves made it even more difficult for the British to justify legitimizing the Confederacy or offering them any support whatsoever. So basically, it's not like the Emancipation Proclamation was sent out and every slave and every plantation walked free. That's not the way that worked. What it did do is when the North would come into an area, the army, all the slaves would run and join the army. And that they didn't join the army, but they were following the army basically because they were free. And then when they got to some place where they could go on their merry way, that's kind of what they did. And you can see there the last part about that is that about 25% of the South slave population left their plantations and followed the Union Army for their protection. Now, it got to a point where there's a couple instances in the war where there's too many. They weren't well enough equipped. They were too old. There was too many women and children. They couldn't keep up. And so it's like if the Union Army's crossing a bridge and they're in a hurry or they're under attack or whatever the case might be, you can't leave the bridge up forever. That can do more harm than good. So there's a couple instances like that happened throughout the course of the war. But we'll talk more about those type of things when that time comes.